Welcome everyone. It's 5 p.m. We'll start. Welcome to everyone that's attended tonight. To those in the gallery, and you'll see. I'm not sure you see. Yeah, in the ancillary room, the people that are attending and watching this meeting from a room not so far from here. So welcome to those as well. All of our officers here supporting us in the work we do around, and our colleague councillors here that have arrived to either ask questions or watch over what we do. Thank you to Wendy and our admin support. I will move on with the meeting as swiftly as possible. So our first item is the minutes. That's at pages 5 to 10 to confirm it's a true record, of course. If you're happy with that, I'd like proposer and seconder. Thank you, Paul. Who's seconded? Julie seconded those. Those in favour of approving the minutes? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you. Declaration of interest. Do we have any declaration of interest for items on the agenda tonight? There being none, thank you. So we will move on to public question time. There's a number of written questions, and there are notifications of a number of you that want to ask oral questions. We will come on to those. Perfectly happy to listen to any oral questions you have. Before I do that, I have one written question from Mr. Stewart, who I believe may be here. Hello, Mr. Stewart. Do you want to come up and ask your question, or would you like me to read it out, or would you just like me to give the answer? But please come up to the lectern and push the button. No, because people listening in won't hear you.
Yes, right. My name is Malcolm Stewart, and I live in 19 Church Path, East Cowes, right? And the question I have for you is as follows. Why is the decision on the traffic regulation order number 12024 to legalise the existing double yellow lines at Church Path taking so long to conclude? The TROs raised for a large number of roads in Carisbrooke, Freshwater, Yarmouth, etc., were all dealt with in the June the 13th meeting. Yes, it is now nearly 5 months after the Church Path TRO consultation closing date of the 3rd of May, and still no decision has been made. There has been chaos in Church Path now for the last 6 years. Well, large lorries and cars use the pavement for parking. And in fact, I have one lorry parked permanently on the pavement near my front door for the last 4 months without ever being moved. The situation is intolerable, and I ask for this to be resolved by the next meeting in October.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. In response, I think I should point out that you may be aware, this is general, please do sit down, I can speak with you sat down. There has been an island-wide TRO traffic regulation order review ongoing. Outside of that, there have been a number of traffic regulation order applications that have been dealt with separately. I just want to make that point clear, because I'll reply to you, and it is impertinent to the reply. So the traffic regulation order for other parts of the island, as I mentioned, as referenced, were part of that island-wide separate district TRO review programme, which has been progressed as a long-standing priority over a number of years, up to 10 years, in fact, since the start of the PFI contract. And these proposals went to consultation earlier in the year, and earlier than the standalone proposal, Mr. Stewart, for your church path in East Cowes. So it's a separate process. You will be aware that consultations are part of the regulations of it's a legal process to make traffic regulation order. So public consultation is part of that, which is what took place. However, following agreement to proceed with the proposal for Church Path as a standalone TRO, outside of that district review that I've referred to, a public consultation was undertaken in April. Since then, and alongside other similar requests outside of the regular review, a review of the representations received has been undertaken for your consultation, Mr. Stewart, and a final decision is due to be formalised shortly. That decision will have to come to a future cabinet meeting, and we will take the recommendations that come out of the officer report, which is prepared with the consultations in mind. This will enable an implementation of the order, the traffic regulation order, and its enforcement later this autumn. I'm sure it's appreciated that progressing TROs in line with the published legislation does take time, especially as the authority is required to undertake those formal consultations and those consultations over a set period. Following an initial assessment and prior to detailed reviews of the representations for us to arrive at an informed decision later on at Cabinet. Going forwards, the intention is to continue with the wider TRO Island review to address any long-standing issues. So in short, Mr. Stewart, this will come to Cabinet. I can't guarantee that will be before the next cabinet meeting. There's also a council process to put that on the forward plan before we can make the decision. But I can assure you that this is coming forward, will move forward, and will be implemented accordingly in due course, hopefully this year. I'm sorry that you've had to wait so long. We are trying desperately to assist the communities across this island with those issues of parking and safety on our highway. And my only reassurance to you is it's coming, Mr. Stewart. And I hope that's a helpful reply to you. If you'd like to ask a second question, I'd be happy to take that. Mr. Stewart. Leads us on to written questions. How are we proposing to deal with these? Bear with us. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chief Exec, for that guidance. So we will go through these in the order I have them, and I have a written question from Mrs. Richards. Now, if Mrs. Richards is here, I'm perfectly happy for her to ask this question. If not, I'm perfectly happy to provide a response in the absence of the question being asked as written. Is Mrs. Richards here? She's not. Do you want to give a written response to that? Do you want me to read these questions out? Okay. So Mrs. Richards' question is, I note from the document Isle of Wight School Place Planning Proposals 2024-2030, page 5, that should the council agree to the reductions proposed, this would result in a 29% surplus of places for the next 5 years, providing flexibility for parental choice and if demand increases. What benchmarking has been carried out? And how does this surplus compare to local authorities with the best outcomes for children in their schools? And I'll ask the Cabinet Member, Councillor Bacon, to provide a reply.
Thank you, Leader. And just to clarify for those who might not be familiar with the procedure, all those who have submitted a written question will receive the reply in writing, whether they're here or not today. I will read through these as required. I will mention, just in case I slipped, that in some of the answers, because they are emailed out, to help the questioner, links to information on websites has been added in. So that may sound a little odd when I read it out, but just to explain that that is part of some of these answers, although not part of this first one, the response to which is this. The Department for Education recommends that local authorities, wherever practicable, maintain a surplus of places to ensure there is an element of parental preference and spaces for families that move into an area. Reducing the number of surplus places ensures better use of available resources, but does restrict greater parental preference. In addition to this, it is acknowledged that the island has a high proportion of rural areas, and through the engagement sessions, it was considered a very important factor for pupils and parents living on the Isle of Wight. A benchmarking exercise against other local authorities has not yet been carried out. However, if Cabinet provide approval to consult, this will be considered and information will be shared through Cabinet in December this year.
Thank you, Jonathan. That, as confirmed, that will be provided as a written response. My second written question I have is from Ms. Kay Condliffe. Is Mrs. Condliffe here? Ms. Condliffe here? She's not. I will read the question out and ask Councillor Bacon for a reply. The question is, has any thought been given to the children's emotional and mental health, bearing in mind they have only just recovered emotionally and mentally from COVID? Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. And this is an important question and has indeed been raised by other councillor colleagues. The answer is as follows. The health and well-being of our children and young people is a priority in all areas of children's services and will remain a key priority. Schools identified through the consultation process will be prioritised for support through a new initiative called My Happy Mind, which aims to help schools, nurseries and families create a culture of positive mental well-being. My Happy Mind is a whole school and every child approach and is not just reserved for those at the point of need, and will work complementary and collaboratively with existing social, emotional, mental health and well-being services on the Isle of Wight. Thank you.
Thank you again, Jonathan. I have a question from Ms. L. Bauer. Is Ms. Bauer here? Ms. Bauer, would you like to ask the question or instead of me reading it out? Thank you.
Hi, yes. My question would be, if your proposals go ahead, how do you think you're going to accommodate the children that are going to have to move schools into schools that currently don't have space?
Thank you. Jonathan, that was the exact wording we had.
It's not the exact wording, but hopefully the reply is still valid. And the response that has been prepared to be sent out is this. Within the Cabinet report, it details options which parents, carers would be offered as a school place for their child. However, if parents or carers' preference is for their child to attend an alternative school, the local authority would work with them to understand which is closest to their home address. Due to the level of surplus places that currently exists within the primary school system, our initial view is that only a small amount of temporary accommodation would be required. However, should Cabinet take the decision to approve the consultations, a detailed review will take place during this process to understand parental preference and any additional works that would be required to support this.
Thank you, Jonathan. Ms. Bell, do you have a follow-up question?
When you say, like, what do you mean by temporary? What is that, a building that's going to be like a prefab type building, or that's kind of what I'm confused about, because currently there's not the space. My son's in year 5 at Brading, and I struggled to get him a primary school place at all because the year group is quite big. So I don't really want him then placed in somewhere temporary, which may not have, you know, the right facilities, enough lunch hall space, toilets, etc.
Thank you. Perfectly reasonable question to ask and concern. So we're interested to understand ourselves. Perhaps you could answer, Jane.
Of course. Jade Kennett, Service Manager for Strategic Development. The use temporary accommodation, I think sometimes people envisage a very, very temporary building, but if you're at Brading Primary School, you'll know that there's the modular building at the back. So it'll be something similar along the lines of those buildings. So actually, once you're in there, feel much similar to the inside of the building. So in the word temporary, the buildings that are utilised are actually fit for purpose, and they're utilised and last more than 25 years. However, as noted, we do have a significant amount of surplus places in the school system. So where possible, we'll be looking to reutilise internal spaces and then possibly relocate alternative facilities out into modular buildings such as those that you have at Brading. Okay.
Thank you for that reply. Thank you for the questions, Ms. Bauer. I intend to work through these questions. This is an important issue for parents and people that have turned up here, and I intend to work our way through these. I'm going to ask, we are already 15 minutes into this, and we have 15 minutes allocated. So I'm going to ask you as cabinet members if you're prepared to allow us to continue with public question time. Just show, please, so that we have a record of that. That's a unanimous. Thank you. We'll proceed. Thank you for that, colleagues. My next question I have is from Mr. S. Richards. Is Mr. S. Richards here? He's not. I will therefore ask his question. Mr. Richard asks, is the reduction in primary school places is cited as the most important factor in improving the quality of education across Ireland's schools as part of the education strategy? How does the Cabinet Member for Children's Services, Education and Corporate Functions plan to raise education standards when the level of surplus primary places just 2 years after proposed school closures is forecast to be higher than the current level of surface places? I'm sure I understand that, but over to you, Jonathan.
The answer is the Isle of Wight Council has a statutory duty to ensure the sufficiency of school places, and a key part of this will be the adoption of a new school place planning strategy. This is a constant work stream that all local authorities should review on an annual basis. By September 2027, we forecast, with no changes, to have approximately 443 vacant school places. The proposals would see a reduction to 253 surplus places. It is acknowledged that this is still a high proportion of surplus places, but the local authority must also consider the current number of children within our primary schools, and it is our professional opinion that closing 6 schools and reducing 2 schools' planned admission number, or PAN, is an appropriate first step to reducing the level of surplus places. And Chair, I think you may have skipped a question because we've gone from number 25 to 27. I've got a question 26 from Mr. S. Paul. I don't know if you've turned 2 pages over at once.
I'm sorry, Councillor Bacon. I have that to ask next. It was stuck to the bottom of that sheet of paper. I'll come to it now. Apologies for that. This is from Mr. S. Paul. Is Mr. Paul here? He's not. So I will ask the question on his behalf. Why would you close Oakfield only to send pupils to a smaller school with children put into porter cabins placed on what would and should be their playground? Would it surely not be much more sensible to send the children over to Oakfield from Greenmount, as Oakfield has a much larger site and relatively new building? much more able to accommodate the increase in students, including those from the proposed developments in East Ryde. Greenmount could then be used as a satellite for Medina House without the need for students to be forced into porter cabins. Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. The written response is as follows. It is acknowledged that there are currently, excuse me, that there are currently higher numbers of children in the upper years of primary schools across the island, typically years 5 and 6. However, the review of the sufficiency of school places is aimed at reducing the number of mainstream school places to align with the declining birth rate and to improve the education system across the island. Greenmount Primary School was identified as a potential option for children to be offered a school place due to them having some existing accommodation that could be used to accommodate bulge year groups, but could also reduce the building footprint in the future should this be required. In addition to this, utilising the summer 2024 school census data, this identified that Greenmount Primary School has 284 children living within a 1-mile radius of the school. Oakfield has 200. This data indicates that there is a greater need for a school located in the area of Greenmount. However, more detailed reviews would take place if approval is provided to consult. And I think that is a very important point on a number of these issues about the level of detail that can be gone into at this stage and what is possible during consultation. I add that note. It's not in the written answer. And then the written answer, just for your information, I said some referred to online data. The written answer includes a reference to the summary document providing all the key data and information in relation to Oakfield Primary School. That will be part of the answer that is sent to Mr. Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Mr. W. Paul, is Mr. W. Paul here? Hello, Mr. Paul. Mr. Paul has asked the following question. Would it not be more sensible to close more rural, smaller schools, such as St. Helens, which, as I understand, has smaller class sizes and fewer children that live in close proximity to the school? Unlike Oakfield, which has a large number of children who live in close proximity to the school, who under the current proposal would have a significantly longer journey to walk to Greenmount. I feel this would not help attendance, and also I would not be happy about my grandchildren walking such a distance, especially in the winter and potentially in the dark. Some parents may not have cars or be able to afford the bus fare. Councillor Bacon.
Again, the prepared answer is as follows. Cabinet are being asked to consider proceeding with a consultation on the closure of Oakfield Primary School. The consultation process would include understanding views on the proposal, such as those expressed in the question. Oakfield Primary School has 4 schools located within 1.3 miles distance of it: St Mary's, Dover Park, Haylands and Greenmount. It is important to note that St Helens Primary School is designated a rural school, and therefore there are additional features when considering a closure. And this is a quote, opening and closing of maintained schools guidance sets out that there is a presumption against the closure of rural schools. This presumption does not mean that rural schools can never close, but that the case for closure should be strong and clearly in the best interests of educational provision in the area. Given the strong educational outcomes of St Helens Primary School, the local authority are not currently considering closure of this school.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. Mr. Paul, do you have a follow-up question? Thank you for that. Thank you for your question. I have a question from Mr. N. Binfield. Is Mr. Binfield with us? He's not. I'll therefore read it. Could the Cabinet Member for Education please explain to the Chamber how placing braiding children into temporary accommodation at 2 schools, and in the case of St Helens, a school that does not have a working kitchen, which results in hot meals being driven over 5 miles to school, drives up standards and improves well-being. Can the said member reconsider his decision to consult on closing Brading School and instead consult on the closure of St Helens School, meaning children can attend the school with appropriate facilities? There is a supplementary I'll answer after the response to this.
The address to the, response to the first part of the question. At this stage, an amendment to the schools identified within consultation proposals will not be considered. Cabinet are being asked to consider proceeding with a consultation on the closure of Brading Primary School. This consultation process would include understanding views on the proposal, such as those expressed, and I repeat the side comment I made earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. And the supplementary question from Mr Binfield is, could the Cabinet Member for Education please explain to the Chamber how Isle of Wight low income families are expected to get their children to school from Brading on expensive buses on roads often affected by flooding? Could the Cabinet Member for Education please reconsider his proposals to consult on the closure of Brading School and consult on the closure of St Helens, which has a more sustainable and quicker service to Bembridge for those who don't drive?
Thank you. I'm afraid the answer is a short one and repeats the main answer to the first question. At this stage, an amendment to the schools identified within consultation proposals will not be considered. With regards to transport or unsafe walking routes, the normal school transport policy would apply. And again, Mr Binfield will be provided with a link to the further information in that regard.
Thank you, Jonathan. Dr Wilson, Dr R Wilson. Dr Wilson, please ask your question.
Thank you. Prior to the unhelpful intervention of the council several months back, Cowes Primary was a thriving school with a healthy intake. Cowes was mistakenly labelled as a school for closure, which the council acknowledged fault for eventually. This caused a quarter of the school to move their children away, labelling Cowes Primary as not financially viable. Is there any possibility that if Cowes Primary were to be confirmed to be not at threat of closure, that Cowes Primary's intake would improve? Furthermore, we're at the beginning of the COVID intake and experiencing a nadir of birth rate. If an intake of Cowes Primary's second year were to be achieved again by closing Cowes Primary, it would not be able to school these children in Cowes. Have other less drastic and less permanent options, such as closing one of Gurnard's or the failing Lane's Ends forms, been explored? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr Wilson. Councillor Bacon.
Yes, I'm going to offer a little apology here because some of these answers were prepared due to the quantity of questions that came in quite late in the day. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to read out a table of information. This will be forwarded to you as soon as possible, but it contains a detailed table of the forecast data for the Cowes Primary planning area. And the written element of the answer is that from this data, it is noted that a level of surplus places already exists within this area, with no schools filling their planned admission number this academic year, 24-25. This surplus is set to significantly increase, and therefore the local authority does not feel the option of avoiding a school closure is viable.
Thank you, Jonathan. That will be sent to you, Dr Wilson, and this will be published, of course. Is this a website? Yeah. All these replies will be published on the website for future reference. Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes. I suppose my other question is, Cowes Primary and Gurnard currently have SATs pass rates of approximately 70 to 71%, whilst other schools in the area have a SATs pass rate of approximately 20%. And these schools are not currently being considered for consultation. My question is, how does it make sense to close a school or consider closing a school with above average SATs results when other schools with quite poor results are not being considered? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
It may be that I look across the room for a little more technical assistance on a question such as this, but I think I can say that a vast range of considerations played into the list that has been developed, but also a number of restraints played into which schools might be included on that list. I think on that note, if I look across the room.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. Naomi Carter, Service Director for Education, Inclusion and Access. Currently, the legislation does not allow a local authority to close an academy.
And that is the key restraint I refer to. That is the key restraint that I refer to, but it is
Thank you.
one
So,
of a
look,
massive criteria that we're considering.
yeah, thank you, Doctor. We are going to go with some oral questions. Would you, if you wish to ask another question, could we take it then? I still have, yeah, I still have a number of written questions. Thank you so much. I have a question from Mr. Lambell. Lambell, is Mr. Lambell in attendance? He's not. I'll ask the question then. How can a school that shows better academic results than the schools nearby, in brackets, Cowes Primary, be asked to close when surely looking at the stats, this school excels academically in the early and later years? Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. I think we're starting to touch on repetition in some questions, but that question came in advance and this is the response. The Isle of Wight Council have reviewed all primary school provision across the island to ensure that a reduction of school places can be achieved. Due to the level of surplus places within the Cowes planning area, reductions must be made and a school closure is not avoidable. Cowes Primary School has a published admission number of 30 and physical capacity for 315 pupils. The information and evidence from the review tells us that the school has been undersubscribed in each of the last 2 years and pupil numbers fall significantly short of the school's published admission number each year. This means it is difficult for the school to be financially viable and to regularly have good outcomes for pupils. Recent academic improvements have been achieved, however, historically, the end of primary outcomes have been below national average. As identified within the report, alternative options have been considered. However, the local authority does not have the legal ability to propose the closure of an academy.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. I will move on to Jay Thomas. Is Jay Thomas with us? No. I'll ask the question. Will the staff be transferred under Tupi to Gurnard alongside the Cowes primary children?
It is a short answer to this one. As the council are the employer for both schools, Tupi would not apply in these circumstances.
Thank you for that. Ms. Z. Rogers. Is Ms. Rogers here?
Hello, the question was sent in by Miss Rogers and I'm here to represent her in Arrington, Sahara King. I don't have the exact wording on me, so would you mind reading?
Of course.
Thank you.
So Ms. Rogers has asked, Jeff Williams, the Diocesan Director of Education, emailed us and said, I quote, not I quote, Ms. Rogers quotes, our view is that if an education authority proposes a closure of a C of E school, there should be an alternative C of E school nearby that parents are able to send their children to. There should be a solution that allows parents to have that choice. Can you tell us which nearby school, that's a C of E school, has enough spaces for all of our children in order to meet this criteria?
Thank you, Chair. Whilst it is not a statutory requirement to automatically allocate pupils from a closing Church of England school to another, if parents or carers' preference is for their child to attend an alternative Church of England school, the local authority would work with them to understand which is closest to their home address, that being the obviously key factor. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to ask a supplementary question on behalf of Mr. Rogers?
I would, yes, please. For most of us, the nearest CV schools are Newport, Carisbrooke and Shanklin, who have all told us that they are full and would not be taking any more admissions in the new year. So that drastically limits the choice of CV schools on the island. If a further 3 were to close, that is 3 schools worth of children to find places for in a very limited number of schools left. How would that be able to be accommodated?
Thank you. Jonathan, would you like, Jade, we will provide an answer and this, that you'll get a written up, a written response as well.
Yeah,
Jade,
yeah,
please.
we'll add it onto the written response. So I can confirm in terms of Carisbrooke C of E school and Newport C of E school, they both have reduced their published admission number from 60 to 45, and therefore they have additional build capacity. So we would be working with parents through the consultation process to understand if that would be a preference, and then the role of the local authority would then be to work with those 2 schools to understand how those places could be accommodated.
You stated earlier about temporary accommodation being mobiles and things like that. That doesn't take into account the need of children with physical disabilities and impairments, like my son, who is partially blind. He cannot be in temporary accommodation because it is not safe for him to be in there. From Arreton, we have many children who that is the case for.
Okay.
And this is why so many of us would de-school our children.
Yeah, thank you. I think that we would be happy to say that we believe that's part of the consultation process, and that we would welcome and encourage you to make those representations during the consultation process. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chair. I'd repeat that. Obviously, it would be of great benefit to all involved, I think, and this obviously personal information if direct contact were made with support officers to provide support in that regard.
Thank you. Mr. El Valvona. Is Mr. Valvona.
Hello. Yes, with regards to the school closures, I'd like to know, is the proposal to close all 6, or is the possibility of only closing some of them also being considered?
Thank you. Councillor Bacon.
Proposing to have a consultation. The proposal within the Cabinet report is to consult on the reduction of surplus places and expansion of special educational needs provision across the island to support improved education standards within the context of the emerging education strategy, and therefore this could result in the closure of all 6 schools.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question, Mr. Valvona?
Yes, I'd like to know, because Brading Primary School has both special educational needs places and mainstream, and part of the reason for this proposal is to provide some more special educational needs places. Is there going to be a provision of places with the same blend of special educational needs and mainstream, which I think is very important for the children to learn social skills from the mainstream pupils?
Thank you. A very important question.
And I think the short answer is yes, we are hoping as part of this process to improve our special educational need provision, and that is part of it. What you say is quite right and has to be part of what we do.
Thank you, Jonathan. And the final written question I have is from Mr. J. Valvona.
Mrs.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have Mr. or Mrs. on my written question. It's just J Valvona. I'm sorry, it's Mrs. J Valvona. Yeah. Is Mrs. Valvona here? Shall I read the question then? What is being proposed for more SEND provision? Is there going to be a specialist school or will there be more units within mainstream schools?
Slightly longer answer to this one. The Isle of Wight Council has identified plans to expand the number of special educational needs and disability SEND provision across the island by more than 200 places. Part of this expansion programme has already commenced, with St George's School opening a new satellite provision in East Cowes, which is the island's first school dedicated to children and young people with social, emotional and mental health, SEMH. And there's been some mention of that in the press today, it should be said. Other expansions include increasing the number of places at Greenmount Primary School's resource provision from 6 to 12, and Medina House School expanding their capacity from 104 to 138. All three provisions are now open and have provided an additional 60 places for children and young people this September. Within the report, there are details of the wider SEND expansion proposals, which, if approved, will be consulted with alongside the reduction of mainstream places. One of these proposals does include the expansion of Medina House School through a satellite provision. This proposal will be achieved through the reutilisation of the Oakfield Church of England primary school site. An additional proposal is a consultation on the closure of Arreton Church of England primary school and the reutilisation of the site for a new therapeutic high anxiety mental health provision, all of which would be subject to further consultation with the diocese and the Department for Education. And again, the questioner is going to be provided with a link to relevant documentation that is set out at the bottom of the answer.
Thank you, Chair. I will move on to oral questions. We have set aside 15 minutes. It's 5:42. We'll see how we go. I have notification of 2 written questions, and if I may take them in the order I have them, and we'll see where we go off that. But we have 15 minutes from 5:42. Sam Pickard.
Yeah. Good afternoon, good evening. I'm Sam Pickard. I live in the Cowes area. I follow on from Dr. Wilson's question. To repeat, in the proposal, there are some schools with well above national average and good Ofsted. These are to be proposed instead of closing failing academies in the same area. The question was why? The answer is because this council has no power to shut academies. We were told by councillors at the place planning meeting that all schools, including academies, are on a level playing field. This just isn't true. The report states, your report states that the strategy must be school type neutral. And yet none of the schools proposed for closure are academies. Therefore, this council does not have the authority to make the best decision for our children. It needs to go to the Department for Education. You have 3 options today for this proposal. 1 is to reject it, 2 is to approve it, or 3 is to seek additional information. You need to seek additional information on how you can make the decision, which includes all school types. So all schools are in the picture, because today you only have half the authority. If you don't, you're just making the easy decision and not the right decision for the children. So will you consider putting that into the proposal?
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Baker. I would just say that we are considering moving to a consultation this evening in terms of what Cabinet are being asked to do. We are not being asked this evening to take a decision on school closures. Just make that very, very clear.
But the consultation is on named schools already.
Thank you. I'm asking Councillor Bacon to reply to you.
Thank you. As has been said a number of times, yes, we do not have power over academies unless they agree. approaches that are made to academies, if they are rebuffed, then that is one of those restraints I referred to earlier. However, I would say that in recognition of that point and the position it leaves us with, we have already made moves to speak to the Secretary of State, and we've spoken to, I think we've spoken to one of our MPs, and one we're just waiting to have the conversation to support us in finding out if the position might change. But we have an incredibly pressing problem that we have to deal with. If there is any scope for those restraints to change, then that could change things, and we're doing what we can to find out, but we can't let it stop us proceeding to deal with the problem that is causing our schools, our school system at the moment to fail our children in terms of educational standards.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. Do you have a follow-up question?
No.
No, okay. Thank you for your question. It's appreciated. We have a, I've just got one more, Mark, if I may. And it's Mrs. Jen Hughes. Mrs. Hughes.
Hello, Council. My name is Mrs. Jen Hughes. I am parent representative for Oakfield CAV Primary School in Ryde. Given that the demographic of our school is such that many pupils and families access services outside of the school and rely on services provided by the school, I would like to ask the question that with the cessation of Hampshire's partnership provision of MASH in March 2025, talks regarding necessary expansion of the Partnership for Education, Attainment and Children's Health, including but not limited to the previously mentioned My Happy Mind initiative, and the highlighted rollout times of this council of these initiatives running into the years, with a My Happy Mind rollout mentioned for September 2025, and that's rollout, not implementation. How will the local authority be able to effectively deliver on their repeated promises to prioritise every child and family affected by the proposed school closures in the timeframes proposed, and, to quote Ashley Whitaker, deliver improved outcomes for island children? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hughes. Jonathan or Ashley, which Jonathan, you take it, please.
Well, I was actually going to look to Ashley because I think there's quite a lot in that question and a number of technical points in there that I think officers might better answer.
Thank you very much for the question. You are correct to raise the matters that we have a large amount of transformation going on in children's services. People will be aware, I think, that the new independent directorate came into being at the beginning of February. And from the very start of that period, we began the planning for the arrangements that would be put in place to follow on from the end of the service level agreements with Hampshire. And you're absolutely correct in raising the multi-agency safeguarding hub, which is one of those service level agreements. We also started engaging with a wide range of stakeholders across the whole Isle of Wight community with regard to education. And so where we are today comes as a result of a large amount of not just consideration of the views and opinions of children and young people, their families, school staff, and other stakeholders who care deeply about the Isle of Wight. But it also comes with a lot of planning that's been going on behind the scenes. I think that we are going to be very busy, and I also think that we have appropriate plans in place to make sure that we will be able to implement these proposals if it is the case that Cabinet decide to proceed with them tonight. And I believe that we also have plans in place to implement new arrangements relating to the service level agreements, including the multi-agency safeguarding hub. We have extended the service level agreement with Hampshire for the multi-agency safeguarding hub until the end of March. So we have 2 months added to the original timescale. And we have taken the decision that we are going to be establishing a new multi-agency safeguarding hub on the island. I'm actually pleased to tell you that this afternoon we've made an offer of a role which has been accepted by a very experienced person who's experienced in establishing multi-agency safeguarding hubs. They're going to be starting their role on the 30th of September. We have been speaking with colleagues in the police and the NHS for many months about this. When we did the original options appraisal about service level agreements, and we did it for all 10 service level agreements within the first 3 months of the directorate, the conclusion for the MASH options appraisal was that the best solution for island children, young people and families was to have a MASH on the island. And we have an ambition in time to actually create an all-age MASH, because at the moment we have an adult MASH and we will then have a children's MASH as well. And we believe that by taking a whole family approach to it, that actually the experiences and support we'll be able to provide to children, young people and families will actually be better by being able to take a whole family approach. So I believe that we are at a sufficient place in that planning to deliver on what we need to do. We have internal approval to bring in some extra resource already, and we're actively recruiting. I would say that there are certain pieces of work which are going to be particularly challenging. And if you've heard me speak before, you'll have heard me say that I believe in being transparent and honest and open as much as possible with people. And I think that has helped us to build trust with the communities that we serve, and we will continue to do that. But there are areas which will be challenging. So, for example, educational psychology. Nationally, because of the significant increase in children and young people who are presenting with special educational needs and disabilities, for example, emotional wellbeing and mental health, there has been a very significant increase in the need for educational psychology, and there has not been a corresponding increase in the number of educational psychologists. We are advertising, we'll continue to do so. We're likely to have to be innovative in how we use the resource that we access. So we may move to a mixed model where we employ some educational psychologists ourselves, that we commission some educational psychology from other local authorities, and indeed that we commission some private educational psychology. So that's an example of where there will be challenges, but I don't think those challenges are actually any different to how they are now, because under our current service level agreement, you know, that we are not, for example, where we want to be with the issuance of education and healthcare plans. So I do think we have a sufficient resource to implement what we need, and where we don't, we have plans to bring in that additional resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Going forward from those points, Mr. Whitaker, I'd really like to understand if you're talking about mental health initiatives and psychologists, etc., and transparency, how you feel closing a school with a very high population of SEND children and additional needs, emotional, you know, physical, etc., how you feel that closing that school, which has been, it's actually been named as one of the schools in the top 10% of impoverished schools in the whole of the UK. How are you going to promote health and well-being to those children who, in the Ofsted reports, it states that they are happy. It is a happy, inclusive and loving school, and we embody the love, hope, honesty and trust values that Oakfield so embodies in everyday you know, education with the children. Those children are happy. What you are going to do if you take these proposals forward, and it goes across the board for all of the schools, is you are uprooting several hundred children who are happy where they are, and you are going to make them unhappy, thus making the problem an even bigger issue for the Isle of Wight as a whole. And I'd also like to draw the Cabinet's attention to the fact that there is an exact correlation. There is a correlation between happiness of children, trust of their local authority, and how if they become disenfranchised with the local authority, they then don't care about their community, and there will be an uptake on antisocial behaviour, defiance, and this will have a wider impact on the community of Ryde and the island in a whole. We will have more people engaging in antisocial behaviour because they feel forgotten by the local authority and let down.
Okay, Mrs. Hughes. I'm going to get thank you, Mrs. Hughes. I'll repeat what I said a little while earlier, but please engage with the consultation process. Many of those comments are extraordinarily valuable and need putting into the consultation process. So please do that. I'm going to ask Councillor Bacon to briefly respond. I would prefer our officers are not tasked with giving their feelings about projects. That's more in the territory of us as elected members representing our residents.
Well, thank you, Chair, and I fully appreciate the concerns that you've set out. And as the council leader does say, I think those are exactly the sort of things that, should we proceed to consultation this evening, we need to very fully explore. I don't think any of them are news to us. There's been some very careful consideration of such matters in getting to the stage we're at, but we can't fully consider matters until we enter a consultation process. I've spoken at length with your local councillor, Michael Lilly, who I think is in the room behind me. We've had a not dissimilar conversation today, and I've sought to take account of all these issues if we go into consultation. Otherwise, I think if we go further, we're almost turning this into a meeting to discuss a particular school, when what we're doing today is considering a decision as to whether we proceed into a consultation where such matters should be properly considered and will be properly considered.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. And I'm going to push on because we are running out of time. But Mark, please ask us a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I'll try to be brief, at least as brief as my style allows. I'm sure Mark Chiverton from Unison, but I'm sitting here with trade union colleagues from the National Education Union, and it is the fact that over the last few days since the proposals have been floated, we've visited all the schools that have been affected or in the process of doing. And I've got to say, there are huge numbers of cogent reasons why people, staff in those schools and the communities that they serve believe that these proposals are seriously flawed and wrong, and all kinds of reasons are coming forward for that. And we've heard some of those spoken very eloquently to this evening. And I think one thing that the council, I think, does need to bear in mind is the real danger of losing long-serving, skilled professionals as a result of this, and a real danger as well of leading into an acceleration of homeschooling on a much bigger scale. And I think that is a real danger. But the question I've got behind that rant, but I hope it's not a rant, because I do think that we're representing people seriously here. The question I have is exactly how you're going to be proposing in terms of meeting with staff in schools, with communities, in order to get their views in a considered way. And this does need face-to-face involvement, and not just written responses. But also, I'd like to ask, will elected members, are they prepared to commit to an urgent meeting with trade union representatives, because we can channel views that are conveyed to us very, very strongly, not just on behalf of staff, but the communities that they're serving. So will you commit to an urgent meeting with us to talk about the concerns that are being raised on an hourly basis with us?
Thank you, Mark. I will ask Jonathan to reply. The second part of your question, Mark, you may have my assurances that we will engage, as we always have done during this administration, with the trade unions and your members, and we will continue to do so, Mark. You have my assurance on that. Jonathan.
That's what I was going to say. Yes, plain and simple, Mark. And in terms of the consultation process, obviously it would be putting the cart before the horse to have arranged all that before a consultation's been agreed to. But absolutely, the process we will follow will aim to be as open in person as possible with all those who wish to have meetings, whether they be staff, parents, communities or trade union. So we want to make this the fullest possible consideration and the most open and transparent consultation process through meetings and whatever other, I was going to say media, but I don't want to mention social media at the moment, but whatever other formats that we should take to ensure that we gather views, listen to views and are able to respond.
Mark, have you got a very quick third question?
Very
Mark?
quick, and that's a helpful answer. One question I'd just like to ask, and it's sort of come up tonight, but trade unions have been raising it, is given the fact that it has been established that there is an unequal or non-level playing field in terms of academies and local authority schools, is there not a real danger in this that a number of local authority schools could decide to take recourse in going for academy status to try to avoid closure in the future? And I just wonder what steps were being taken to avoid that.
Mark, it's a very good question. Yeah, Ashley, would you just briefly respond to Mark? We can take that out of this meeting anyway, Mark, as you know. We're available at any time, you know that.
Mark, thank you for your question. We have been engaging with the Department for Education about these matters since we came into post in February. They are very well aware of the challenges on the island and have been included at all stages in the development of our draft education strategy and the proposals. And Naomi leads on the communications with the team at the Department for Education who are involved in the process that you have just alluded to. The DFE share our view that we want to work with them and other stakeholders to make the changes on the island to improve education outcomes for children and young people who go to school here. And I believe that they are committed to working in partnership with us to make sure that that happens.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Mark. We've done an hour on questions when we should have done 15 minutes. I hope that's indication of the willingness of this cabinet to listen and try to respond at this initial stage of the process, and that we will be available, as will all of our staff, during the consultation process if we move to that later this evening. Thank you all for your questions. I'm going to move on with the rest of the agenda, and we will be coming to the item of school place planning very shortly. Thank you.
Chair, can I just, might be me, but we were being watched or had contact with the other room. The screen seems to have gone blank. Are we still in contact with them or?
Thanks for that explanation. Thank you for your intervention to ensure that everyone has full access to hearing what we have to say. I'll move on. In view of the extended questions, I will make no announcements, item 4, as chairman's announcements, except to say I am going to ask that we move the agenda around so that the next item we deal with will be item 7A and 7B, followed then by item 5, the QPMR, and then item 6, which is the local enterprise partnership transition. If you're in agreement with that, please show your hands. Thank you. We will then rearrange the agenda. That leads me on then to item 7, and I will ask Councillor Bacon to deal with that. There are two parts, part A, part B. One is on the future arrangements for services currently delivered by Hampshire, and part B is the school place planning. Over to you, Jonathan.
Well, Chair, should we perhaps go straight to item B? I think that would be appropriate. Thank you, Chair. Well, we know what we're talking about. This is the paper before us headed School Place Planning. And there are a few things I would like to say that I hope will add to the discussion and questions we've already had. I would like to, before I go into that, to mention two things. I've been asked to confirm that the Cabinet has received a letter from the governing body at God's Hill, and to note that that has been read and its contents noted and will be taken forward as part of the consultation process if we agree to that shortly. Secondly, I did make comment at the scrutiny meeting on Tuesday about some problems with rumours and misinformation, and I'm afraid that didn't stop things happening into yesterday, as a result of which it seems there have been some statements or assertions doing the rounds in relation to the position of the diocese and their role in relation to the Church of England schools. As a result, I have a statement here that has come from Mr. Sanders, who is the Deputy Director of Education, who has said, please could the following wording be read out to Cabinet as discussed with Bishop Jonathan, with whom I had a conversation yesterday. So I will read this word for word, so there's no chance of misunderstanding or dispute. The Anglican Diocese of Portsmouth has pledged to play a robust and constructive part in any consultation process to close Oakfield C of E Primary in Ryde, Brading C of E Primary, and Arreton St George's C of E Primary. The diocese view is that if the closure of any C of E school is proposed, pupils should be offered places at an alternative C of E school that is easily accessible to families. The diocese was represented at school place planning board meetings. At no point during these meetings were schools named or specifically discussed for closure. The meetings were to discuss the integrity of the process and to share relevant data about the significant issue regarding surplus school places that the council faces. For clarity, the diocese was not involved in the decision to select and name the schools in the consultation, nor has expressed its agreement for those schools to be named for closure. And as I say, I will pass that over so it can be added to the record, but that hopefully clarifies the position of the diocese going forward. So, Chair, if I may to put the paper before you, say that, as I've remarked a couple of times, the decision that we're seeking to take this evening is about whether we proceed to a consultation on dealing with surplus school places. And it is perhaps an unfortunate part of that process that to pursue that end, schools have to be identified and there has to be an initial consideration of them prior to launching any consultation. A very detailed process of analysis and inevitably comparison has been undertaken to draw up that list. All schools were considered. The Director of Children's Services and I are satisfied that a transparent and robust process of consideration has been followed. It is perhaps unfortunate that a factor that plays into the process is the fact that some schools are academies and the lack of power the local authority has over them. It is likely, but for that the list would be different. What we are left with is the optimum list taking account of the considerations and those restraints upon us. Further, I am aware that some commentators have remarked that the list should be longer. That may be so, but given the criteria considered, including the availability of school within reasonable travelling distance, a balance has been sought to be achieved. That balance has been between the aim of achieving the necessary aims of this process and undue impacts on children and parents. I accept that we will probably be left with a greater surplus than should maybe be the case. But as an island, we need to protect a range of schools and rural provision. That is something that has come through in engagement exercises and is sought to be recognised in the proposals made and in the balance we have sought to achieve. Part of that balance is also about leaving room for potential growth should the trend in birth rates reverse. Understandably, the instinctive reaction is to contest the closure of the school you have an interest in, but I would ask that people take a moment and think of the bigger picture here. We need to reduce the number of school places on the island. We have too many primary school places. This is due very simply to a declining birth rate. It is a national problem. We are not alone in having to face and deal with this issue in the country. The problem that this leads to, I think is not always being had regard to, is that resources which are already stretched become inadequate. Schools are funded on a per pupil basis. If you have a full classroom, you are fully funded. But if the classroom is half empty, you are only half funded. However, you still have to pay for the essentials, which include expenses that cannot simply be halved, such as the maintenance of the building, heating, and most importantly, staff. It means cuts end up taking place elsewhere to keep schools going. It means also that with too few pupils spread across too many schools, most, if not all, are adversely affected. And that leads us to the real big issue here, which is standards. The key issues that head teachers and governors who have stretched budgets, cannot spend their time concentrating as they should on educational standards. They cannot get the resources they need to help improve standards, whether that be sufficient good staff or equipment. Improving the resourcing of schools is fundamental to improving standards. As the funding model is not going to change, the only way we can address matters is through considering closures. And we desperately need to address matters. We have the worst educational standards in this country. We are not serving our children well, nor are we serving our employers or our economy well. School is about preparing our young people for life, work, careers, their futures. Failing them at school is unacceptable, both for them and for the island as a whole. I should note in passing that it's the case that throughout the lead up to this decision, this meeting today, the heads have been the loudest voice demanding action. Without changes to the numbers of schools, they cannot do their job of educating the island's children. Indeed, I noted that at Tuesday's scrutiny meeting, one head teacher spoke and their request simply was that we get on with this process. As I said a moment ago, we have to look at the bigger picture. The risk is that if we just look into our own backyards, we are damning the education of our children across the island now and for future generations. Actually, it's not a risk, it's a reality. So we have to grasp the nettle and enter upon a process which gives us the chance of addressing the very real problem we face. Very simply, if we do not reduce our primary school places, we will never be able to improve educational standards. This is all happening for the first time within the context of a comprehensive all-island education strategy. This was published earlier this year. It's a developing document. Everyone is invited to, and indeed, I would hope they would contribute to it so it is developed for when it is finalised next year. But I mention it because it is important to note that what we are proposing today, what I'm proposing today, is part of a strategic master plan, not another piecemeal exercise. And the strategy's overriding and core aim, its purpose, is to improve our educational standards. As it sets out in its draft form, an essential part of improving standards, an integral part of creating better standards is creating a sustainable school estate. And then that gives us that opportunity to raise standards on a properly resourced basis. I would also say that the fact this is about standards relates to a further key part of the proposals that are being put forward. And that is looking for alternative educational uses for any sites that become available that will help improve our educational standards. Indeed, specific provision to improve ISCN provision has been mentioned, and also the provision of potential teacher training facilities. We don't have any on the island. It's a serious flaw in our system, and it damages us in how we can improve things for our children. Lastly, I must accept that heels have been dragged in the past. Place planning should be an ongoing process, as I think has been remarked earlier, and it is fair to say it has stalled somewhat over the last few years. And that's part of the issue we face, and which heads have been very vocal in pointing out. What we're facing was probably coming over the hill 6, maybe 7 years ago. We're dealing with a problem that has backed up over time, and I'm afraid that feeds into the extent of the problem and the extent of the solution that is required. But fundamentally, this is about taking the wider view and about creating the foundations to educate our children properly. It is about considering as an island what we want from our school system. If we care about our children in the long term, we need something better. The paper before us, difficult and distasteful though it is for many, is the necessary first step in achieving that end. And Chair, I won't go through any of the detail of the paper. I think we've done enough detail, but I would take you to the recommendation, look for a seconder, to the fact that the Cabinet provides approval to consult on the reduction of surplus places and expansion of special educational needs provision across the island to support improved education standards within the context of the emerging education strategy as set out in Appendix 2. I think I have a
Thank you,
seconder in
Councillor
Councillor
Bacon.
Andre.
Seconder is Councillor Andre. Thank you, Councillor Bacon. Questions or comments from members of this cabinet?
Comment.
Thank you. If everything was perfect, we wouldn't be sat here now discussing ways forward. We're members of the Isle of Wight Council Cabinet, but we're also residents of the Isle of Wight. We have family, we have children at school, children who've been to school and passed through our education system. Last year, we sat here and we pulled a paper. And if you remember, cast your minds back 12 months, we weren't ready. We could see there were flaws. We could see as a cabinet that we'd only got some of the story. So we pulled the paper. That was difficult. That was very difficult to pull a paper when we know that the standards of education are not as they should be, that the funding element is ridiculous. And when someone mentions Oakfield and the community element, the central government give a damn about the community element of a school. Now they count the number of children in the classroom. The funding formula is wrong. We take the brunt, as we always do. We take the brunt with council tax, etc., because the funding of local authorities is totally inadequate and totally archaic. And we're stuck with the same thing here. We've got 2 new MPs. And I know we're open to criticism as a council, and so we should be, because we put our head above the parapet. We actually turn around and say, okay, we want to try and do something for our local community. And that's what we're here for, something positive. And I can only look at the positives on this, the upheaval and what have you, our young children might have to go through to attend a new school. It could be my grandchild. It could be someone's son or daughter. I'm in this with you because I don't live in Portsmouth to make a decision about the Isle of Wight. I've always lived on the island. I've always taken a pride in what I've tried to bring forward in the way of the Isle of Wight Council. That's why I'm an Isle of Wight councillor. As I said, the funding formula is wrong. It doesn't take into consideration the positive aspect of schools on local communities, whether they're rural or within an urban area. Our SEND education, whilst we try our best, whilst we try and achieve the impossible, is still lacking. It's lacking throughout England. So I want to say that, and I've had enough of the questions. I came here today. I want to have my say on this, which is why I've turned up. And what I want to say is that I point the finger at central government about the funding. I point the finger about not taking into consideration in our schools the community element. But I also look at the situation with regards to, and we've all been here. I've been here more than most, I'm afraid. And we can't attract professionals to the Isle of Wight. It's difficult to try and bring in new blood, new ideas, a modern 20th century outlook on education. And we're stretched. We've got to look at what we've got and how we can build on it. And look at some of the positives that are within this. This is but one spoke in the wheel is placement and placement planning, and it is planning. And I'd like to say that when we're looking at it, this isn't something that's just thrown together in 5 minutes. This is something that has caused a great deal of angst, discussion, research, review, and it will continue. And that's why we need this consultation to take this forward. I think we owe it to our young people of all ages. I think that what we need to do is to start to support our SEND pupils in the way that they deserve to be supported, in a totally adequate way of doing so, and not stretching things and trying to make everything as positive as we can be. That is not the way forward. The way forward is to actually turn around and say, this is something that is so very, very important. I'm going to put my name to it. I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to put my name to this. It's very, very important. I've been in County Hall all week because I've been ill, but I've come in tonight purely to come in and take part with this, because quite honestly, to sit back and do nothing is not an option. We've got to consult on this, and it's about the consultation. You know, I welcome people coming in and talking and discussing things, because that's the power of the people on the island. We're not in and out every 5 minutes. We're here to stay. And that's a powerful foundation. It really, really is. It gives that little bit of robustness to the discussion. So I want to see standards going up. I want to see our pupils that need support get the best support, not just support, get the best support we can give them. And that might be a little bit of a change. That might be something a little bit more drastic, but we owe it to those kids and those families to actually say, yeah, we're going to try and do something. We're going to try and make this better. And this is but one spoke in the wheel of a strategy. There will be other things coming through that will once again start to raise the standard of education on the Isle of Wight, but also the well-being the health and well-being element of our children and our families on the Isle of Wight. I always say when I was at school, and I'm old enough to be educated by officers coming out of the army and the navy. No, you never had that. You've had trained teachers, but no, I had that element. And I say that I lived on the Isle of Wight. I went through school, and I was educated in spite of, not because of. And I think that's what you've got to realise is that, okay, we don't want this in spite of, we want it because we're giving the best. And we're not going to be able to do this unless we start to look at ourselves in a meaningful manner and say, hey, I want to be part of that consultation. And I'll take my hat off to everyone in the gallery there tonight and in the other room, although I can't see them, because they care. And when you care, you want to do the right thing. So I want to say thank you very much. Thanks for giving me the overextended time, Chair, but I think it's very important to get this into the right perspective, that this is a start of a movement to get our education system back where it should be and where our children deserve it to be. As I say, you know, I don't want to walk down the road and someone turn around to me and say, my child was educated in spite of and not because of. We've got to have aspirations to take this the whole journey. We're starting this journey. Last year, we sat here. We had a row of people from political sides saying, you should be doing this, you should be. I don't even suppose they read the paper. But it was a good old sharp dig. The Alliance, which is not a non-political bringing together of council members, to actually say, okay, you've given us a paper, officers, but we can see the flaws. So we are taking that away and putting that to one side, and that was it. And then if you remember, just after that, the people I was looking at, who were officers from Hampshire, they're not here now. We've got our own officers. I just think that, and I say to my colleagues around here, because we take a hell of a lot of flack every day of the week, but I'll just say, by standing firm, digging your heels in and saying, we are going to do it, but we are going to do it when we have the facts, the figures, the reviews, the consultation. And I mentioned consultation because that's what I'll be voting on in a moment. But believe you me, I'm in a positive mood to say that's where we need to be with our education system, with our officers who worked damn hard to get it to this stage. And we're still going to take things on board from the gallery today. Gentlemen's still up there. And I'll say, yeah, if we're talking about academies, trusts and all that, yeah, we should be looking at it. We are looking at it, but we want to get a result. I didn't ask for Ryde High School to be taken over by an academies trust. Did I? No, I didn't. I wanted to stay under the local education authority. Didn't happen. Government decided the recreation ground alongside Ryde Academy is now the Academy sports field. Hallelujah. You know, we've been done to the same as everyone else has been done to, because we are residents of the Isle of Wight, working for the Isle of Wight and trying to make a decision to actually improve the lot for our children, our families, and indeed the authority as a whole. We don't want to spend money willy-nilly and just appear that we're doing something. It's got to be done. We've got to have a positive outlook on it. And as I say, I've been done to as well as anyone else. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much, Chair, for your forbearance. But I think that what I'd like to say tonight, thank you. Thank you for your hard work. I appreciate it. I know members do. And come to pass in future years, the hard work will actually absolutely bring rewards, and positive rewards, and I'm sure of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Your emotion and passion is well understood by us, and thank you for delivering that. I can only hope that when you're better, you'll be able to talk a little longer, Ian. But thank you. Thank you for your comments anyway. I've got one small duty to do before we move to the vote, and that is to say that corporate scrutiny considered this 2 days ago, and their recommendation was that the scrutiny committee noted the report. So there we are. That's Michael, you indicate you want to speak now or at members' question? Yeah. Okay, Michael, we'll indulge it. I hope it's, yeah, I will indulge it, and then we will move to the vote. But you're perfectly able to ask questions at members' questions later in the meeting.
I've got quite a lot of questions about poverty that are already logged. Of that, I do welcome the fact that officers, your team, Ashley Whitaker and Councillor Bacon, have heard me out this week very strongly. I don't know how many emails I've actually communicated with it, and I can only say that the words of one of my residents eloquently spoke on all the things that I've raised, and I do have deep concerns about the inclusion, my view, of one of the schools that has the poorest children and most vulnerable children on the Isle of Wight, and one of the poorest areas. What I do want, my questions are, as part one, I've got two questions. As part of the consultation, can communities put forward alternatives or amended options and proposals during this process?
Thank you, Michael. Jonathan, would you like to respond to that?
It's a very simple answer. Yes, of course, it's a consultation.
That's a yes, Michael. Absolutely. Do you have the second question, please?
Question is, it was very eloquently put by residents about safeguarding, and I'm very, very concerned, particularly of Oakfield School, but also some of the other schools that actually have some of the most vulnerable children on the island. And in fact, many of those children have social workers and actually part of our system, living in quite deprived situations that were not, a lot to do with poverty. What assurance can you give to the schools and families who are the most vulnerable that their safeguarding needs through this consultation process and future are fully protected and they are not put at further risk, more than risk than they are living in at the moment? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Jonathan, would you just reply to that?
Michael and I spoke earlier today and I gave him face-to-face an assurance, and I repeat that in public. I will give every possible assurance that those needs will be met as part of this process and indeed ongoing into the future. That's part of why we're doing this, as I think we've sought to explain in the discussion and speeches earlier. But thank you for your questions, Michael. And I look forward to working with you over this as we go.
Thank you, Jonathan. I've had a proposal. I've had a seconder. Therefore, those in favour of the proposal, please show. Who moved to the consultation? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Jonathan, would you like to move on to the second part, which was the first part of the for those in the gallery, there is a second part of this. If you are interested, please stay. If you're not, obviously it's a public gallery. Please feel free to make your own move out of the gallery and the building if you so wish. If you so wish to stay and listen to the rest of it, please do so also. Thank you for your patience.
Chair, perhaps as people are now moving out, I can briefly move on to the next paper, which is future arrangements for services currently delivered by Hampshire County Council under service level agreements. The position is set out very clearly in the paper, and in fact has been part of the discussion earlier. Paragraphs 1 to 3 mention when the partnership between the Isle of Wight Council and Hampshire Council relating to children's services came to an end earlier this year. Service level agreements were created for 11 services so that on a buyback basis, as it's called, Hampshire County Council would continue to deliver those services for a period of time. We're looking at now how those services continue into the future beyond the date of those agreements. 8 of the 9 remaining SLAs will cease at different points between November and the end of March next year. One may possibly extend into 2026. But we now need to move, or indeed steps are currently ongoing, to move to future arrangements. Obviously, again, as I think has been mentioned already, the most critical of those is the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, or MASH, which is currently expected to, the provision provided by Hampshire is expected to cease on the 31st of March next year. The full list is set out over the page, paragraph 5. And what this paper seeks to do is to give some flexibility to establish the alternative arrangements that as and may be necessary going forward. So to facilitate that, there's a recommendation which appears at paragraph 4 of the paper, back on page 229, that authority is delegated to the head of page service in conjunction with Strategic Director of Children's Services and the Director of Finance to ensure appropriate resources required to ensure the council can meet its statutory duties are available following the end of the current service level agreements with Hampshire. That is the recommendation and the reason for it, Chair, and I look for a seconder.
Thank you, Jonathan. Seconded by Councillor Andre. Any questions or comments? Ian.
Mentioned about the MASH and a provision of that facility. Is that Germany called it? We okay? You mentioned MASH. We're going to set up a MASH within the Isle of Wight. Are we therefore looking at a budgetary pressure coming forward in the next financial year, please? Or are we going to make the savings out of the money that we pay Hampshire County at this moment?
I'm not sure we can give the answer to that question at the moment because the decision to take that step rather than enter a further partnership is hot off the press, I think you'd say. So I'm not sure we can get into any number crunching, but Mr. Whitaker may be able to provide a little more detail on that front.
If I may, I'll just ask our Chief Exec to comment, please, before I do.
Thank you, Chair. The Council currently funds the provision with Hampshire County Council. The proposal in front of you would use that funding to provide a service in-house. The intention would be to provide the service within the budget that we currently have. However, if it becomes clear that that's not the case, we would need to put a growth bid through as part of the budget process. We are not in a position to increase the budget without going through the next council's budget process.
Thank you for that, Wendy. I mean, do you need to add anything to that, Ashley?
I'd just like to say that, you know, we're already starting to go through the early stage budget process, so we need to make sure that we don't get further pressure further down the line. Thank you.
Thank you. We are mindful of coming up to the budget process for next year, and it's a very valid point and question you've made. There being no further questions or comments, we've had a proposal and seconder. Those in favour of this proposal, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you. We'll therefore move on to item 5, which is the report of from the Cabinet Member from Housing and Finance on the QPMR, Q1, page 11 to 214, lots of pages in our paper. Ian.
As you can see, I've read it, and I know that my colleagues have read it as well. I don't propose to go through each appendix, but if anyone wishes to raise or highlight from their own area of service or their remit, please do so. What I will say is, and I'll go to, what I'm going to do is virtually read verbatim, which is the exceptions, the performance exceptions, and KPI 2A has been amended to reflect the total number of people living independently at home. This was previously a measure of those living independently after support by reablement services, which is now Appendix 2. The average number of people on the housing register remains in red, which is one of these things that until we can actually get a program moving, then we can't house the people that we need to house. But we are working towards that. I know that the housing team are working towards the how can I put this? The non-dependence on temporary accommodation chair. I think that's the big report, and I'm gonna come on to a paper that we've got here with that as well, because that's draining the adult social care budget as well. So with that, you know, I'll draw that to you. The KPIs are there, they're listed. I'm not going to, as I say, go into the bed of the report. A couple of things I do want to mention: corporate complaints, and I know that if you want to elaborate on what I'm going to say, please do. But I'll just, and I'm talking to our officer over the back row there. But what I'm going to say is Appendix 13 refers to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Annual Review Letter. Appendix 14 deals the number of corporate complaints received by service areas. I'll just shoot down to the bottom. I think it's down here. We had one less complaint, I believe, this year, and only, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sharon, but I think it's four went through to the local government ombudsman, and I think that was it, wasn't it? We had eight went through, 4 were upheld, I think.
Yeah, so just to clarify, we had 12 complaints that went through to the local government ombudsman. So our complaints process is that we have an initial first stage complaint where we investigate and we respond to the claimant. And if then they're not happy with that response, a more senior officer will look at the stage 2 complaint and give an opportunity, if the customer is again not happy, to move forward to the ombudsman. Now, in the situation with the ombudsman, he looked at the complaints, and of the 12, he upheld 8 of those. And I think we would always say that when no one likes to receive complaints, but actually what we're trying to do is to learn from those complaints. So the whole focus and the main recommendation from the ombudsman was around making sure that we're learning and evidencing our learning from the complaints, and to look to see how we could remedy and apologise more and potentially offer a reconsideration of or an appeal process to satisfy the complainant. So as a result of that, and you'll see further on with the service complaints that have come in, the improvement that we've made over the last 2 years of picking up learning and feeding that back into service delivery, so we can overall improve the service that we're providing to our residents. Hopefully that's a summary for you on the complaints report.
More concise than I'd have been.
Thank you, Sharon, Ian. Paul?
Thank you. That's really refreshing to hear from Sharon. I think one of the issues that the Isle of Wight Council has had for a very, very long time is people complain about some of the services that they receive, and we as a council are often very, very defensive, even when we get it wrong, and we do get it wrong sometimes. And it's really refreshing to hear that there are lessons that are being learnt, and we accept culpability when we do get it wrong. And I think we'd be foolish to believe that we never get it wrong. And I think it's an arrogance to assume that we do never get it wrong. So I really am pleased with that. Within my portfolio, planning coastal flooding and such like, again, there are improvements that can be made. And certainly we have been struggling with planning applications and trying to get them processed, but we now have a team within the planning department that I think is a lot more robust than we were at a few years ago. So, to be able to build upon that is positive, but there are still a long way to go. And through the peer review that we had a few years ago, there are still action points that still need to be addressed, and I will be picking those up. But thank you, and thank you for your work on this, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Paul. Ian, any
Yeah,
comments from you?
I'd love to move on.
Yep.
I did offer, and Councillor Fuller very readily took up the offer to interject with things within his remit. So I say thank you for that. But I want to touch on the appendices that run in with my remit, and I'll touch on housing and finance. Appendix 8, if you want to look it up. I'll give you the key points. Capital programme remains fully funded with no forecast overspending. Debt financing costs are forecast to remain on budget. Cumulative borrowing levels are forecast to remain within the limits approved in the council's capital strategy. Actual borrowing outstanding is also forecast to remain within the limits approved by within the council's capital strategy. The council's revenue budget is forecast to be £3 million overspent at the end of this, at the end of last year. In the current year, mainly arising from rising costs in adult social care, but we've got structured debt in place for that, but we're looking to, we might well have to readjust that in the forthcoming budget. £3 million overspend is providing an additional 2.1 million to adult social care from the COVID reserve. So we're taking money from our COVID reserve to go into adult social care to ease the pressure on that. Appendix 9 is our draft capital outturn. And the key point is capital programme was fully funded with no forecast overspend. There was slippage of 14.5 million, and that expenditure will now take place in the current financial year instead of the last year. That's the capital programme. I suggest when we move forward on that, this is purely from myself to you leaders, that we revisit our capital programme. If we got a slippage, do we progress with some of the capital programme we've got in place? Appendix 10 is the draft outturn for 23-24, and the Appendix 10 describes last year's final position against the revenue budget. And the key point, the council underspent by 2.4 million last year. I'd like to say thank you to all departments and all areas of service who've actually kept us in the positive vein that we always knew we would be, although further down the corridors I heard section 114 every other step I took, I think, at one stage. But thanks to the prudence and the responsible attitude of the way that we've run the business of the Isle of Wight Council, we look in a reasonable state compared with the Nottingham City Councils, Croydon's, Thurrock and other such places. The 2.4 million underspend, we've added, what have we done with that? We've added 1.3 million to the capital resources for 25-26 for the forthcoming year. Given the scarcity that we know we've got in funding coming forward when we start to set our budget. And we've added 1.1 million to general reserves to replenish them to previous levels of 12 million. So our reserves now are going back to the 12 million mark. How long, I wouldn't like to say, but we're there and we're going to 12 million. And I think the Section 151 officer is pleased with that. So once again, that ensures that the council's financial resilience remains at reasonable levels, and in particular, given the current year's forecast overspend of 3 million as at quarter 1. Appendix 11, I'm going to move on to capital monitor for quarter 1 this quarter. Capital programme remains fully funded with no forecast overspend. So that's the highlight of our capital monitor for quarter 1, and I'll move on to Appendix 12, the revenue monitor for quarter 1 this year. The appendix describes progress against the approved revenue budget for the current year. Key points, the council's revenue budget is forecast to be, as I said, 3 million overspent in the current year. And that arises mainly from rising costs in adult social care and care packages, about 2.2 million, even after providing an additional 2.1 million to adult social care from the COVID reserve. So we've got challenges, and I know we're on top of it all. So we're looking to come good as the year progresses. Children's social care, I would say, children's placements were about 1.2 million overspent in that, and this year's overall forecast of overspend of 3 million supports the decision to increase general reserves by 1.1 to provide some mitigation to this forecast overspend. And that's why I said we put 1.1 million into reserves, but we know where we've got to support various areas of service and elements. So basically, that's it. That's my report, and just want you to note it.
Thank you, Ian. Appreciated. Any comments, questions on that? Debbie.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of points I would like to highlight from Appendix 2 on adult social care. That I'm bearing in mind that we are talking about averages here for the quarter, that the number of people being supported by adult social care has increased. But as many of us will know, we are working along a healthy lives strategy, which is promoting people's independence and giving them the choice, much more choice, to actually stay in their own home. And the average number of people living independently at home and being supported by adult social care has seen a slight increase, whilst the average number of people supported in care homes has actually seen a slight decrease, which shows that the hard work that is going on behind the scenes is actually working, and more people are being supported to live independently in their own homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Any further questions, comments? Ian, you're happy? This is a report, It's not to, vote on, it's a report. We've noted it. Did we need to note it? We've noted it. We've noted it. Thank you, Ian. Appreciate it. And if I might just say before I'm passing, Ian referred to it, there are some authorities that struggle badly with their finances, and indeed we know what a struggle it is and has been to bring forward a budget that works for this authority and still trying to maintain our services and our service delivery. Extraordinarily difficult over 14 years when the original cuts to local authority funding started. I just pay testament to all of our staff, to our chief exec for leading this organisation in a way that has provided the support for us to deliver that, continue to deliver those services. And to Chris, he's probably online, our Section 151 officer, who has maintained, to our frustration at times when we asked him for release of some money and he's refused. To his credit, he steered us through this financial difficulties that we otherwise would have faced far more seriously. So I thank all of you for continuing to help us deliver the services that we can afford to deliver on this island and set a budget. So thank you all. Reports noted. Thank you, Ian, for your work also on this and for coming tonight, having a period of pretty severe illness this week. So thank you for that. We'll move on to the next item, which is the local enterprise partnership integration arrangements. That is from me, a paper from me, and I will speak very briefly to it. This is an arrangement, a paper, an arrangement that sets out the updated information of post-LEP funding. So the Solent-LEP Enterprise Partnership that was dissoluted by government, when it came to a cessation in March this year, there remained a sum of money that had been granted by government into that organisation. Therefore, that money after the 1st of April had to be dealt with. This paper addresses the way in which we are proposing to allocate the money to deal with the situation post-LEP. And it is such that originally we were going to use an organisation called Solent Partners, who were ex-members of the Solent Local Enterprise Partnership. It transpired that we did not move in that direction and use that organisation. Instead, we moved to a three unitary authority arrangement of Southampton, Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight, who would, moving forward under the terms of reference, which are in your paper, page 223, sets out the arrangement that the three authorities would follow in the future. It is not to deal with the money that is to be agreed by the three authorities as we move forward. And so part of the recommendation that I'll come to sets out how and why that will happen. So the Cabinet's recommended to note the update contained in the report, which I've mentioned, and it's important to note that the leader of the council is appointed to the Solent Growth Partnership. I didn't mention that. The Solent Growth Partnership is the body that will deal with the post-LEP funding and other matters. And that he has statutory executive authority in future to make capital and revenue spending decisions. I'm not sure if that means individually. I think that means collectively with the three unitary. That could be misread. To invest in economic growth for three unitary authority areas, subject to existing budget or policy frameworks, subject to financial approval of the Section 151 officer of Portsmouth City Council, acting as the accountable body for the Solent Growth Partnership, and in line with the terms of reference for the Solent Growth Partnership attached at Appendix 1, page 223. And finally, further note that future decisions will be subject to existing council decision-making requirements. That's the proposal, colleagues. I need a seconder. Thank you, Julie has seconded that. Any questions, comments? Julie?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for attending all these. It was rushed out. It hasn't been an easy journey. So many variable parts, and government haven't marked exactly in giving steer on how we're going to move forward. We are, and just to say, I'm really clear that we're the economic plans for our individual areas, Southampton and the Isle of Wight, are moving forward, as well as the overarching economic strategy as well. So wish you all the best of luck with all of that, and also your cabinet's here to support you through that as well.
Thank you, Julie. That's very kind. I would just add in broad general terms so that there's some understanding. I won't go into the full detail here, but in broad general terms, there is in the order of £12 million to be allocated through the 3 unitary authorities and invested in economic growth in the area. So it's just an idea of the money involved. Thank you. Any further comments, questions? There being none, it's been proposed, seconded. Those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you, Colin. And on to Cabinet member announcements. There being none. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Let's go round clockwork. Debbie, please. Yeah, clockwork.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to highlight a couple of things, if I may. I was really, really pleased to be alongside the Chief Executive and other members at the 999-day flag raising service. It was a really, really good opportunity to speak with a lot of members of all our various emergency services. And as a result of that, I've actually got a visit planned to the ambulance service up at St Mary's, which I'm really looking forward to that. I'd also just like to highlight that yesterday I attended an integrated care partnership conference over in Portsmouth, where there were some really good discussions concerning the implementation of trauma-informed practice across not only the health services, but also within our policing teams. And I understand that we are the first authority in the country, the first policing team, to actually take this training and to look to embed trauma-informed practice within their working. So that was a really, really good event. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Debbie. Any mention of dentistry?
To that end, I have had a meeting with our MP for East White, Joe Robertson, and I met with members of the ICB. I can give a brief update, but one of the things, there were several things to come out of that. One of the things is that the ICB believe that there are substantial changes needed in the national contract and the way that dentists are funded on what they're calling UDA, units of dental activity. So there is, the ICB are going to come back and brief us on any substantial changes, but I know that there are calls for changes in the way that dentists are funded. We're also looking to build on recruitment for our existing providers. So it's not just about getting new practices to come to the island. We are calling for the ICB to actually look at measures by which we can sustain the dentists that we currently have. I didn't know, but I did find out from that meeting that there is a centre for dental development, and there's actually a dental academy over in Portsmouth. So we are looking at the opportunities to actually potentially have a satellite model for a training centre. So we are approaching it from several angles, both in the short term and the long term, Leader.
Thank you, Debbie. Jonathan.
Two things I would just like to announce and put on record that I think these pieces of news have been rather lost in all the noise about other matters during the week. The first, there was a statement went out today noting the opening of the island's first school dedicated to children and young people with social, emotional and mental health needs. That's on the old Studio School site in East Cowes. I've had the opportunity to visit that just before it opened. It's an absolutely amazing facility. I'm hoping we're going to be able to organise some media days, something like that. There has been some interest expressed so that people can see more widely just what an amazing facility has been created there. And indeed, if anyone in the room it has the opportunity to visit, I strongly commend you to do so. And secondly, 9 Acres Primary School announced at the beginning of the week, for the first time in 10 years, we have a school on the island that has achieved an outstanding rating in all categories. That is an amazing achievement, and I hope the Cabinet will join me in passing on the congratulations to them and the head teacher there for all the hard work that has led to that. And I hope it's an indicator of things to come in terms of standards on the island in our education. I hope the brevity of my announcements belies their importance, but those are two things I wanted to have noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And we do convey our best wishes to all of the team there at that school. That's quite an achievement. First in 10 years is in itself, but for the school and the children and the parents associations, what a wonderful achievement. Well done to that team there. Paul.
Thank you. Just very, very quick update for members. The NPPF consultation is underway from the government. The NPPF consultation, as we all know as Cabinet members, is suggesting that housing on the island will increase from the standard methodology number from 730 to a whopping 1104. Again, we know on the island that that is not a practical number for developing. And, you know, with the proposals that are being made by government, if you are a developer, why would you want to develop on the island when there are more lucrative places to develop on the mainland? We just don't have the resources to be able to hit anywhere near that number. So again, what I would suggest and urge everybody there who has concerns with the number of housing that are being proposed within the NPPF, please contact the government and express your concerns. I know that when the Island Planning Strategy and the number was suggested at 453, that was considered by many people to be far, far too high. And there was a lot of evidence to back up that that number may be lower. So I would suggest that that evidence is provided to government through the NPPF consultation, which ends on the 24th of September. Elsewhere, last week, we had a fantastic site visit where we welcomed the Environment Agency to the island to look at our landslips. It was heartening. We had both of our MPs attending and the members of the Environment Agency, the great and the good, including the chief executive attending, looking at some of the landslips that have happened on the island. One of the issues that we have within coastal protection is that landslips are not really considered by government to be something worthwhile to fund or to support, as we know well with our roads and you know what's happening with Military Road and with Leeson Road. We've had to sort of like fund a lot of that out of our own pockets. So again, it's heartening that the Environment Agency has come along, and you know we are bidding for more funds in the future to make sure that we are recognised as a landslip area, noted as one of the largest landslip areas in Europe. For what we saw last year, so that took place last week, and I'm always hopeful that the Environment Agency will recognise the position that we are uniquely on the Isle of Wight. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Just for absolute clarity, we did receive some small contributions from DFT for some of our work, just small commitments. And I guess second thing is, have you got a number to give out for the minister that we can ring? That's a no, is it?
I think we are writing to the minister and asking about, you know, we did write to the Angela Rayner about our processing and developing our island planning strategy. The feedback that we seem to have is that we continue as we are going, and we hope that the figures that we're looking at and our island plan won't be sunk because of new government priorities. But we have seen this all before. In the previous government, again, housing figure at one time was 1,045 for the island, and we had to incorporate within our planning strategy new garden villages for the island, which we withdrew under this administration. So there are concerns with the housing numbers, and I think we as a community have to be vigilant. As I said, the deadline is the 24th of September, and I would urge anybody that have concerns about that number, that number of housing and the impact that that might have upon the island, to please make their representations to government. Thank you.
Sorry to labour this, but for absolute clarity, we are submitting our existing draft island plan, aren't we?
We've had guidance from council, and council has advised us that that is the way forward, and we haven't heard anything back from the government to say no, hold your horses. So I think what officers are doing is that they are bundling up the representations that we've had from the consultation, and I think that the numbers of feedback that we had was in the region of about 400, less than 400. So again, thank you to everybody who responded to that consultation. So yes, it is all being bundled up, and hopefully it will be ready to go in October to the planning inspector.
Thanks, Paul. Just finally from me, just across the water, Portsmouth are in an identical situation to us, where their numbers are 1,100, their new revised numbers. And of course, we're in a slightly different position to us, where we do have land, but we don't have capacity. They have no land whatsoever on which to build these 1,100 houses. So they're appealing to government for the same reason. Julie, thank you, Paul. It's always worth remembering, as the leader reminds me, they are an island, Portsmouth.
So my update, just very brief, leader. I attended 2 days in Portsmouth last week as a member of Arts Council, and I look forward to senior Arts Council representatives this November. Oh, not working. Oh,
It's not very loud, I'm afraid.
thank you very much. So they'll be coming over in November, as we are a priority place, which means they look to increase their investment and support into arts and culture here. Previously, we haven't had as much as we should have. I've actually asked them that they present to all members of the council on the work and investment they have brought to the island, which is about £8 million in 2021. So no small beer at all. Today I represented the council at Portsmouth Creates annual conference, which I was very, very pleased to do. As you know, working with our partners across the water is immensely important. On Monday, I attended East County Town Hall to celebrate the completion of the huge mural on the Clumbine building, which has been led by the Regen team, which features the story of manufacturing in that building. Items such as this Princess Seaplane, and there's a majestic sea eagle on the side. So do go and see it, or if you're going on the ferry, do go and up on the lounge. You can see it out the back. It's really fantastic. We had some some funding from other partners to come into that, which is great. One Leisure continues its post-COVID recovery, as you've seen in this evening's QPMR report. Next week sees the annual National Fitness Day on 18th September. So everyone at full council can come in lycra and jogging bottoms, I think. And it's a day where we can all get moving if we're able. I attended an LGA event last week at Parliament where Richard Quigley and I pledged to help get 1 million people in the country moving and improve their lives. A quick thank you to our library team who support another successful summer reading challenge, which every year gets our children to discover the joy of reading for pleasure. Last Saturday saw a very successful Heritage Open Day, which was embraced particularly by Newport, with window displays celebrating past occupants, history walks, workshops at Newport Minster, fabulous classic car display on the quay, which was in Ryde the next day, and free entry to museums. And lastly, a big thank you to all the voluntary groups, individuals and families that make our summer carnivals and festivals happen. With the oldest running carnival in the UK at Ryde, such events are an important part of our culture, and I know beloved by our visitors. So well done on a brilliant season of bringing colour and spectacle to our communities. I could say more of what I've been doing this summer, Chair, but I don't want to drone on.
Which town again's got the oldest carnival? Sorry, Julie, I missed that.
You may have heard of it. It's a lovely town called Ryde by the seaside.
Thank you. Karen, do you want to? Yeah, no, it's okay. But do you want to say anything?
Yeah, really not. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of things. I had a meeting with Donna Jones about ASB and actually how to reach young people. So I'm following up on that. It's really important. Those that fall through gaps that maybe don't engage with projects, we really need to look at that. And I've had meetings with police about residents' worries around very similar issues because it seems to be on the up. But what I'm really asking my colleagues and everybody else, if I can follow everything up, and I do, and I really champion people, but what's more helpful is not only just to tell me, but actually register it on the website or phone 101, because these things help them with patrols, and them asking for extra funding, etc. So they can really target where needs to be. So I really welcome people telling me, but they do need to report it as well, because I don't see the things that they see. So that's really important. And since our last meeting, I became the chair of the Police and Crime Panel. So I'm quite first independent and first woman, did I say that? But first independent, certainly, since its inception. And what I am going to be asking is to take the panel out on tour rather than just have it in Hampshire. I don't know if that's possible, but I am working on it. So go out to other parts of the area to increase accessibility and to be able to question the Police and Crime Commissioner. And I'm hoping to bring her here as well. So looking forward to doing that.
Thank you, Karen. Just one question on Ryde Police Station. Is there developments there?
It's opening. We should be getting an invite to the opening in October because the Chief Constable wants to be in attendance and he wasn't available in September, unfortunately. But they have done the work, and people have actually asked why a new front desk has been done, but it's all about accessibility. So there's the higher and that, it's all done to standards of today.
You can explain how you can get round the back, can't you, in the police station? Oh, I was thinking about committing a crime, but there we are. Laura, no, nothing from you, Laura. Ian, do you have anything further? Okay.
I've got, I was going to come on to members' question time with mine, if you don't mind, because it's a ward problem. It's a ride problem.
Yeah. Fine. We will thank you for those updates. We'll move on to the consideration forward plan. Any comments, questions, corrections, addition? I'm kind of dad, but Jonathan.
Just one point, I think it might be a slight amendment. For full council on the 20th of November, Isle of Wight AONB management plan is listed. AONB has changed its name to National Landscapes. The AONB term has now changed to National Landscape, so I believe that should be listed as Isle of Wight National Landscape Management Plan.
Is there an Isle of Wight Day this year? What?
Completely separate question.
That's a completely separate issue. This is the AONB.
Mentioned Isle of Wight Day. That's
No,
what
I
I'm asking
didn't.
you.
Isle of Wight, I mentioned
AOMC.
they're bringing the tea and biscuits round later.
Well, if
AONB,
there's an Isle of Wight Day, I don't need to know about that. I only need to know if there's an Isle of Wight Day this year.
no idea. The AONB has changed its name to National Landscape, so the title of the paper needs to be amended.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair.
Nothing else? No.
Well, no, that is true that they have changed it. I think it needs to be brackets AOMB because people don't understand what national landscapes are. The only other thing is I thought the LNRS was supposed to have been on the November paper. I don't know. I'll check.
Thank you. That being all, Ian, yeah, you're fine. Yeah, okay, fine. That just leads on to members' question time.
Can I get my
Go on then, Ian.
committee
I know.
committee first, cabinet first? We have a situation in the Upper High Street Ride where scaffolding was put round a building. I've got some elderly people, disabled as well, who now can't get their vehicles up to their door, so they can't generally get out because it's a sloping surface anyway, running into the high street. Can the leader put some pressure on Island Roads to actually say that although the date for commencement of work was 4 weeks ago when the scaffolding went up, work hasn't commenced at all as yet. Scaffolding has been taken down from the Upper High Street side of the building, but my residents, or the residents I represent, are left high and dry at the top end of Bank Gardens in Ryde. Now, all I want is, okay, if they're not going to build, take the blessed thing down and put it back up there when they are going to build. So could you assist me with that, Leader? That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. The answer is, of course, I can and will. Terribly frustrating for the residents, extraordinarily frustrating. It's a complicated issue, as most issues can be, involving regulations, involving planning, involving conditions, and involving a very, very difficult situation in a small closure, cul-de-sac, where people live and are unable to access their homes. There's further complications, you know, Ian, in that part of the planning acceptance for this particular project and building allowed the closure of the high street for between 6 and 9 o'clock or 7 and 9 o'clock any morning during the period of the project, which seems extraordinary, but there we go. So the whole Upper High Street could be closed for 2 hours, albeit early in the morning, but nonetheless closed for 2 hours. And the problem with there was no public consultation because the regulations for non-emergency, for temporary planning, temporary TTROs, temporary transport regulations orders, do not require public consultation. Therefore, this came up at a later date with virtually the ward council not being informed and the residents not being informed until the very last minute. So there's a number of very complicated, difficult problems to overcome here. I know of the problem, Ian, as you know that I know, and we will do what we can. It is not acceptable that the scaffolding goes up and no work is commenced on that project for 4 weeks at least now. It's unacceptable. Yes, Ian, I'll help you outside this meeting to do what we can do to find a better resolution in a wider issue. We could maybe talk about Swendy's at some other time. A wider issue. There are some, or could have been some breakdown between planning and highways when the application was approved, which was about 3 or 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And there may be gaps that we could look at plugging, although I'm well aware that planning are more, that are talking more to highways on many issues now. So the answer is Ian, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Members, we have Michael and Susie. Susie, have you got anything you'd like to ask? No. Michael.
Chair, I did submit a list of questions which I would like written reply to, but they were around poverty, in particular child poverty. I did submit these questions prior to the school place plan being published, so there isn't a coincidence, but it does give me an opportunity to actually really raise this issue. I've been campaigning for 9 years to get an anti-poverty strategy by this council, and I know it is on the way, but there are certain things that have recently happened. One is the government are not going to change the 2 cap on the family, which is going to keep a lot of Isle of Wight children still in poverty within that. And also recently, obviously, for a lot of pensioners on the islands, the fuel grant has been cut. I'm glad to hear that the household support fund is going to continue, but it seems to always be every 6 months. It doesn't seem to get so, because without that fund, a lot of families will not have any food, because it actually gives money to things like the community pantries and our food banks and other sort of projects. And I think when I submitted these, we didn't know that was in place. But I'm not going to read them all out because you'll probably want to go home. But I am very concerned that with some of the decisions by the government now, we're heading for winter. We're going to need warm spaces like we had in previous years. We're going to need much more help. Ryde Town Council is actually looking at funding extra help within the help centre because they can't in Ryde deal with the amount of applications for benefits and things that people are coming forward, like the pension credit. I would like to, particularly at this meeting, know about the Community Resilience Fund and is it being rolled out? I put in requests that, there are certain groups that really do, particularly in the voluntary sector, are really trying to actually help and support our most vulnerable, which very much a lot of them, in my area go to Oakfield School. And a lot of people are very frightened about the facilities and resources that actually they depend on, like the community pantry. Because without it, children will literally have no fuel. So and lastly, I do just want to actually emphasise that there needs to be closer working, particularly with the budget coming up next year and everything, to work with the town and parish councils that are actually, not all of them, but a lot of them are going to be the ones more on the front line to support people in poverty. Ryde has a community development worker that's actually trying to get projects off the ground that actually practically help. And I wanted to flag this up. I flag this up every year, but I would like to get some real answers and particularly about the anti-poverty strategy, that it actually does get into the areas of real need, like Oakfield in Ryde, which I believe has been ignored for generations. And I'm very worried. I would like an update on the town, Ryde Town Board Fund, because it looks like the new government are going to cut that, and some of that money hopefully was going into those poor areas. So I'm really concerned, and I'm obviously very concerned about the effect and the knock-on effect to all the communities that got their schools threatened, especially in the continuing cost of living crisis.
Thanks, Michael. I'm going to ask Debbie to just give a quick answer, but before I do, the questions that you've posed, of course, we will provide you as soon as we can a written reply to those questions. So that will come through to you as soon as we're able, Michael. A couple of quick things. Parish councils, well, we met with iWalk today. We engage monthly, regularly with the town and parish councils as a cabinet, and we'll continue to do so. So I realise that working with them is slightly more than that, but it's a link that we've kept held together and continue to develop. We were talking earlier today about this very thing about pension credits, and Councillor Andre is going to take away an idea to, an idea, you can speak to it if you wish then. And the town board, yes, it's in confusion. The new government won't give us clear indications, and I have to say, on balance, it's not looking good for that money to be coming still. I think we will hear in the autumn statement some changes to it, whether it's a reduction or a complete removal of it. Debbie, please, on their wellbeing.
Thank you, and thank you for your questions, Michael. And I think it's fair to say that every member of this council is fully aware of the issues and concerns over the poverty of residents. As you know, we have been working on the development of an island anti-poverty strategy, which I'm leading on. Not only do we meet monthly with iWalk as a cabinet, but we have held extensive workshops and consultations with a range of all our partners that are involved in delivering measures to support our island residents. And that includes, we held a workshop in this very room with members of, well, not just iWalk, it was open to members of all town, parish and community councils. As the leader inferred, we actually discussed today about the issue of pension credits and what help that we can practically offer our residents in that regard. We do, as a council, commission certain organisations, including the Citizens Advice Bureau, who are already running a campaign in respect of helping people with pension credits. We're also very aware that not everybody, and especially within this particular demographic, has access to the internet. So we are looking already, our team is looking to identify benefit claimants that we think might be entitled to. So what we're looking at is there are many residents that may be entitled to pension credits, but up to this point haven't been claiming them. But obviously the loss of the winter fuel allowance, the pension credit may help to mitigate that. So what we're doing is looking to identify those claimants that might qualify, and we will be writing to them directly. But we will give you a fuller answer. But just to reassure you, we are very mindful and we are looking at every possible support that we can offer. Also, our Living Well and Early Help service identify people and actually go to places like the warm spaces where they can actually go through and help people to complete the forms and apply. So there's a range of support that we have out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Michael, really quickly.
Just wanted to say that it's important on fuel poverty on the island, because a lot of people have heating systems which are quite archaic, and obviously fuel is going up even with the cap of about 10%. I think it's important that the council is working along with the Footprint Trust in actually making not only that people can help, claim pension credit and their benefits, but also to look at ways that actually they can reduce costs, by the supplier they choose and different mechanisms of that. And I think we do need to have a campaign in some way this winter to help people with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you all, Susie, Michael, for coming and attending, and we appreciate that. Thank you for all of our officers that have endured and persevered this evening. And of course, thank you to Cabinet members for your inputs, all of you. And we will see you all again soon. When? Next month? I thought we'll full council first and then next month. Thank you all. Safe journey home. See you soon.